let's go ahead and dive right in then. Let's start a little bit by getting your backstory. How did you become an entrepreneur, and what's the story of how you got into business?
Yeah, so I come from a corporate online advertising background. I started back in 2000 at AOL back on the East Coast, and I was in their advertising operations group. And I actually, within about a year or so, I got promoted pretty quickly to be running. I co-ran that entire team with another guy. And so I spent 5 years at AOL, really, really good. That was my first really experience in the online advertising realm, because I'd come from a hockey background. I worked for the Washington Capitals hockey team.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So that was a new world for me, but I was hooked really quickly in that. Then moved out here to the West Coast, and I spent a couple of years at Yahoo in their online advertising group, started to sell online advertising at that point. And then I spent the next 7 years selling online ads between Yahoo. I worked for Funny or Die. I worked for a company called Vibrant Media. And so yeah, that was my world. The online advertising space was my world. I loved it. And in 2010 was really when I started to kind of look at really what was going on in the entire landscape of online advertising. And I was seeing what was going on with small businesses who were trying to advertise on platforms like AOL or Yahoo or any of these other big companies. And they didn't necessarily have the same opportunities that the big brands did, strictly because of budget. It takes a lot of money to be advertising on these big platforms like that. And so I was noticing what was happening on Facebook in the form of small businesses being able to start to build communities on Facebook there, start to advertise and leverage all of Facebook's data that it makes available to its advertisers. So because I came from that online advertising background, I naturally sort of gravitated towards that ad side of Facebook, and I just kind of jumped in, started to teach myself as much as I possibly could. And during this time, I was kind of like, you know what? I kind of want something more. Like, the corporate world it was very good to me, but I also wanted to kind of start to explore what I could possibly do on my own and start my own business. I just didn't know what that looked like. And as I get into Facebook ads, I kind of was like, this could be something that could be that answer for me of creating my own business. And, sort of fast forward a couple of years, that's what happened. I basically saved up a bunch of money in order to leave my corporate job, all the while teaching myself Facebook ads and running Facebook ads for some of my friends who are online entrepreneurs and stuff like that. And then at the end of 2012, I made the leap, left the corporate world to do my own thing, floundered around for about 14 months or so. And then it really wasn't until about January of 2014 that things started to really kind of to click for me. I created my own Facebook ads training program, which I have, to this day. Started selling it via webinars, and then things really, really took off. So it's kind of a long-winded answer of sort of what my background is to kind of bring me up to where I'm at today.
That's perfect. Now, do you still run sort of the agency side of things? Do you still run ads for people, or is it purely training?
Yeah, it's training. Okay. I do get asked pretty much on a daily basis by multiple people to run Facebook ads. It's just not something that I do. I do refer people out. I have a couple of people that are my students who I really, really trust, and I know that they do a really good job. So it's more of, for me personally, it's more of in the training. I do, I do a little bit of coaching and consulting, but then I also will refer people out if they're looking for actual Facebook ads management.
Gotcha. So the sort of main income source for your business is selling the course, or
yes.
Do you have multiple courses, or is it one of main course?
So I have my flagship course, which is called the FB Advantage, and it's that's where I teach a complete automated system of getting leads and sales every day, all using Facebook ads. But then I also have a beginner's course, which is called FB Ads for Newbies, which is somebody who's, look, I want to just learn Facebook ads. I'm a brand new person to this world. I don't know anything about it. Maybe I don't really have an email list yet, or I'm not getting much traffic to my website. I just want to start to learn the basics of Facebook ads. So I have a course for that as well.
Very cool, very cool. Now, I know you've got a couple podcasts in the mix, too. I know you've got The Art of Paid Traffic, which is a pretty popular podcast on iTunes. Now, how do the podcasts all fit into the mix and the business model?
Yeah, so I started out originally, and my first podcast was called Inside Social Media, and this was really when I was still focusing on social media in general. I was still doing Facebook ads, but I was also looking at social media and teaching social media from a more general perspective. So I did that for about a year and a half. It was great. I think we did like 60-ish episodes on that. And then in January of last year, January 2015, I launched the Art of Paid Traffic. And so that's where we talk about all forms of paid traffic. I have guests come on. I have solo episodes where we talk about how to leverage paid traffic to grow your business. So yeah, we do, of course, talk a lot about Facebook ads on there, but how it fits into the business model is, it's exposure, it's branding. I get a lot of customers into my training programs from the podcast. They're like, I heard you, I listened to the podcast, I love your stuff. So I want to kind of take that to the next level. And in addition, it's a great list builder. So, if I have a specific download that pertains to that episode, I'll send people to the show notes page where they can download it, and I'll grow my email list.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, that's I kind of have some selfish reasons for asking that, because obviously I've got a podcast as well that I'm constantly trying to figure out new strategies to grow. Sort of one of my big struggles with this podcast that I've got right now is I've got a pretty large email list, and I'm trying to ramp up the podcast with the mailing list, but when I do that, I'm always sending traffic to the show notes page. So I get tons and tons and tons of downloads on this podcast on my show notes page, and very, very little on iTunes. So it never seems to climb the rankings of iTunes. So I'm always curious to see other people's strategies for growing their podcast.
So I ask you, what's the direct reason that you're sending people to the show notes page and not to iTunes, for example?
For the most part, it's tracking. I mean, it's hard for me to tell how many people are listening to the podcast from iTunes when I can see on my Google Analytics exactly how much traffic I sent to my site. And the other reason is I've got some little opt-in forms and that sort of thing on my blog, so I can directly see some results from sending the traffic there.
No, I hear you. I think it'd be a cool test to see, like to for a couple of weeks, test driving people to iTunes and then watching, like, do you host on Libsyn? Mm-hmm. So then I would look at your Libsyn stats and say, oh, okay, I've been doing it, sending people to my show notes page for this long, but then I tried it for a couple of weeks, sending people to iTunes to see how that does, and then kind of comparing the two, your Libsyn stats sort of before and after sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, for me, when I'm driving the traffic to the website, I've got offers and that sort of thing on the website, so I'll see a little spike in sales with each new episode that goes out on some of my offers. Where if I drive them to iTunes, it's another step in between getting them back to the site. So definitely a good thing to test. So I'll play around with that. That's cool. But let's go ahead and shift gears and talk specifically about Facebook ads. Mm-hmm. So with Facebook ads, is there sort of, this is kind of a broad question, but is there sort of some sort of beginner's tip, some sort of step that you tell people to take just to kind of get their feet wet if they've never run an ad?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the very first thing is be really clear on why you're doing it in the first place. I can't tell you how many conversations I have with people who are looking to get into Facebook ads, or even maybe started Facebook ads, and I ask them, well, why are you doing them? What's your goal? And they're like, well, I've heard from my friends, I hear the success that people are having with Facebook ads, so I figured I should, really jump in. Okay, but you really have, you're paying money out, obviously, to do Facebook ads. You got to have a way, you got to have some sort of strategy to get that money back, whether it's, immediately or a little bit down the road. And so I would say that's the first thing, is be really clear on what your objective is going into it. Meaning, like, I want to grow my email list so that I can sell more of my products or services, or whatever that might be. Mm-hmm. Secondly is be really clear on who your target audience is. We always hear about this whole, the whole customer avatar sort of thing. Being really clear on who your target customer is, and then starting to brainstorm, who are some other people in your space, whether it's competitors or other people like you, who are going to have Facebook pages. And most everybody's going to. Mm-hmm. And so start brainstorming a list of who those people could be. And then Facebook has a great tool called Audience Insights. And it's in your ads manager, or you can just Google Facebook Audience Insights. That it's a free tool that you can go in there and you can find, it'll help you locate and come up with other relevant target audiences that you potentially could target for your ads that are relevant to you and your business. And so I would start there. Be really clear on what your why is, and then then from there, be really clear on who your target audience is, and start brainstorming some targets that you could potentially be targeting with your ads.
Very cool. Now you kind of already went into the next topic that I wanted to get into, which is targeting. Now, do you what sort of strategies do you have behind targeting? I'm trying to think of a very specific example. A lot of the people that listen to this are bloggers, authors, coaches. That's kind of the demographic of people that listen to this. Let's say that there was a health coach and they wanted to start running some Facebook ads for the sole purpose of growing a list. How would they go about the process of picking their targets for Facebook? Because one thing I want to ask as well is when it comes to Facebook targeting, I know you can go and find pages of similar similar businesses, but it doesn't seem that every single page could be a potential target for ads, and there's that whole thing there. So how does one go about finding the ideal targets to go after?
Yeah. So I always like to start off with the warmest traffic first, meaning warm traffic, cold traffic. So warm traffic, meaning people who are already familiar with you and your brand. So if our goal, so normally that would be like, I want to target people who are on my email list. I want to target people who are visiting my website. So I want to retarget those people. I want to target my Facebook fans. If we're looking to build an email list, then you obviously don't necessarily, unless you want to segment people on your email list who are downloading like a specific product that you have, or a specific download or whatever it is, then yes, I would recommend targeting your email list. If you don't want to be doing that and you just want to be growing your email list, then I would look at targeting. If you're getting traffic to your website, I would be retargeting those people who are coming to your website. So the idea is to get them onto your email list. So if they're visiting your website, they're interested in your content, so they're more likely to opt into your website. Same thing with your Facebook fans. It's those people who are, they've become a fan of your page, so they're going to be familiar with what you do and who you are. They're also more likely to sort of take that next step and to get on your email list. I would then look at creating lookalike audiences out of those groups of people. So a lookalike audience is all that is Facebook is finding brand new people on Facebook who have the same or similar attributes as the people that you've uploaded into Facebook, like your email list, or that retargeting audience of people visiting your website. Because Facebook knows so much about its users, Facebook can find other people on Facebook with those similar attributes. So I would be creating a lookalike audience out of your email list, your website visitors, your Facebook fans, and then targeting those people to grow your email list from there. Then I would look at sort of that colder traffic, if you will, meaning other Facebook pages. So those people are not necessarily going to know who you are. And so, I'd be looking at, it comes back to what we were just talking about, like brainstorming a list of potential targets of Facebook pages that you could target your ads to. Now, as you just mentioned, Matt, that not every time that you want to target a specific page, it's not always going to come up as an option under your interest, unfortunately. So it's a case of, I wish I had a good answer for you, but as you type in that interest, as you type in that name of the Facebook page and it doesn't come up as an option, so two things I'd recommend that you do. Number one is go to actually that page on Facebook and copy that exact name of the page, and then go back into your interest section of your targeting to see if by pasting it there that helps, because that can help sometimes. If that doesn't work, my recommendation there is to check back in a few weeks. 'Cause I've had instances where, like today, maybe I can't target something, and I check back in 2 weeks, and all of a sudden I can target. That has happened. I've asked Facebook this directly, why you can target some pages and not others, and I've not gotten a good explanation for it, because there are pages with, like, let's just say 50,000 fans that I can't target, but then I have a page with like 10,000 fans and I can target. So there's really no rhyme or reason to it. It's infuriating. I get that question all the time. I get it. It's frustrating, but it's kind of just one of those things.
Now, with the lookalike audience, do you know, is there a minimum that you have to have before you can create a lookalike?
Yeah, it's a couple hundred people. So you want to make sure that if you are creating a lookalike audience out of your email list or your website visitors, it's got to be a couple hundred people before Facebook will have enough data to work with to be able to create that lookalike audience for you.
Very cool. So just to kind of recap on targeting, step one would be to retarget visitors that came to your website. They obviously know about you now because they've been on your website. Step two would be to create a lookalike audience based on the people that have been to your website and have kind of been responding to your other ads. And then step three, then start experimenting with cold colder sort of targets.
Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of the sort of the order, if you will, of targeting that I like to teach, because the warmest traffic, they're going to be the highest converting, because again, they're already familiar with who you are. And then that cold traffic is probably going to cost you a little bit more because they're not familiar with who you are. So they're going to take a little bit, more warming up to do, if you will.
Yeah. Now with the targeting, how dialed in do you get? How deep do you get with, splitting out countries, splitting out, obviously most of the languages are going to be English, but, there's all sorts of options in there for demographics, household income, that kind of stuff. How much do you mess with that when you start doing your targeting?
Well, it really does depend on what your niche is. Like, so I have students, for example, who, one that's coming to mind, she's a jeweler and she creates custom engagement rings. And so there's kind of like a threshold of what people are going to pay for that. Like the types of rings that she creates cost like a certain start at a certain level of money. So she, for example, does want to target people with a household income of, starting at X dollars and then go up from there. And so, so for someone like that, it's going to make sense. And you should be using those household income levels because that is her ideal customer. Outside of that, it just really depends on what your niche is and what you're into. Like if you are into, I don't know, if you're a financial planner, again, you probably want to be putting in some sort of household income levels that are relevant to your target audience. Someone like myself, if I'm, selling, or if I'm targeting people for an upcoming webinar on Facebook ads, I don't necessarily need to do household income sort of thing. So it's really, knowing who your exact target customer is, your potential audience, and knowing enough about that person to be able to set the targeting up accordingly. The cool thing is that Facebook does give us a lot of options to get very granular with our targeting. I mean, at this point, we're recording this at the beginning of March 2016, and just a couple, for different people, they've kind of rolled it out over the past several months, but I just got it a couple of months ago where they now introduced something called detailed targeting. And so before, if I wanted to target, fans of like, I don't know, just off the top of my head, like WordPress and Tony Robbins and Entrepreneur Magazine. It was only a case of I could, in the same target group, I could only target people who have an interest in Tony Robbins or WordPress or Entrepreneur Magazine. Whereas now with a detailed targeting, now I can target people who have an interest in WordPress and Tony Robbins and Entrepreneur Magazine.
Yeah.
Or I could say, I want to target people who have an interest in WordPress and Tony Robbins, but exclude people who have an interest in Entrepreneur Magazine. So I can get really granular with that, and they've just sort of rolled that out in the past couple of months.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, I know Facebook also, they kind of give you that low-hanging fruit option of when you make a post on a Facebook page, they put the little boost post there. Do you ever recommend people use that at all?
I don't. I always laugh when I get that question because it's sort of like, yes, when you use the boost post button, it is a form of Facebook advertising. And Facebook has done a good job in sort of reducing the difference between what you can do with a boost post and what you can do in, say, Power Editor.
Right.
And they've given you a little bit more control over the targeting, over the budget there. However, the problem is that a lot of people use that boost post button just for the heck of it. Kind of going back to what we started talking about originally, where like, what's your why? Like, why are you doing these in the first place? And a lot of people kind of use that boost post button. It's like, well, I just want some more people to see this post. Well, okay, but you're spending money there. What's the reason behind it? Like, what's your goal to make that money back at some point? Right. And so because of that, and combine that with, you have a lot more functionality and control over things once you get into Power Editor. And that's what I teach in the FB Advantage is I definitely recommend using Power Editor. So if you do post something on Facebook, on your Facebook page, and you do want to turn that into an ad, go over into Power Editor and do it that way rather than just boosting that post.
Now, do you know the difference between what Facebook does with that post versus what happens when you do it through the Power Editor?
You mean like how they treat it?
Yeah. I guess I could probably answer my own question, but I suppose when you do a boost post, for the most part, it just kind of gets it out to more of your fans and maybe friends of your fans. Or if you go into the Power Editor, you can get much more specific with the targeting, right?
Yeah, well, you can do yes, but you can do additional targeting now with the boost post. Like you can target a custom audience, meaning like your email list or your website visitors. So you can do that. You can also go up to, I think the level of the cap is 10 interests, meaning like the other Facebook pages. So I can target additional pages on top of that. Look, if you do want to do a boost post button, and you can still track conversions in there if you want to be looking for opt-ins and so forth, then I would sort of limit it personally to if I'm going to use boost posts, I'm just going to do it for my Facebook fans. And so I want to get more of my Facebook fans to see this post and take action. Make sure too that if your goal is to get opt-ins and build your email list, that you are tracking those conversions. So that's kind of the only case that I would use the boost post button, just because I'm such a big fan of Power Editor.
Gotcha. Now, with the actual ad creatives themselves, is there any sort of ad image that you see kind of works across the board? And I know these questions are very broad because there's so many different niches and that sort of thing. But are there any sort of common things that you tend to see that work well with ad images?
What I've kind of found recently is that, with like someone for like myself, for example, I like to be in the image itself, because we always have to be thinking about when we're creating our ads, what's the mindset of people on Facebook? Like, why are we using Facebook in the first place? Well, it's a platform. It's a very personal platform. We're on there to share with our friends and family and so forth. So the more that you can have an image with people in it, whether it's you, your customers, you talking to your customer, whatever that might be, those tend to work extremely well. What I've seen a little bit recently is that the colder traffic, meaning the people who don't know who you are, is that if you have an image without you in it, that can work really well. Because again, there's really, like, you being in the image isn't going to sway them one way or the other, because they don't know who you are anyway. But if it's warmer traffic, if it's people on your email list or website visitors or Facebook fans, then yeah, it's a good idea to put yourself in that image in some way. I would say don't be overly produced, if you will, with that image, because again, it's people are sharing things with their iPhones, on Facebook. So your image should sort of look like that, because and I don't, again, it's a general statement here. So like if you're a big corporation and you have, this really high quality image of the company that you want to portray, then yes, you probably don't want to do something with your iPhone, that it needs to reflect your particular brand. But a lot of people get caught up with that, both in image and in video, thinking they have to have this highly produced, image or video, and that's just not the case. I mean, grab your phone and start taking pictures or start taking video, and that's going to work really well on Facebook.
Yeah. And one thing that I've always kind of thought was a good idea as well is, pull out your iPhone, open up Facebook, just start scrolling through your feed and look at the type of stuff that grabs your attention.
Absolutely,
it's not typically like a polished banner for Coca-Cola or something like that. It's going to be somebody's selfie or something.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, what about the actual ad copy? Do you have any sort of best practice tips for the actual written copy that you put in an ad?
Yeah, so the first thing that I would do before you do any kind of Facebook ads is I would Google Facebook ads policies. And you want to make sure that you're familiar with their policies, because it can get you into trouble if you're not familiar with the policies. And so especially when it comes to ad copy is Facebook. Look, Facebook's number one priority when it comes to its users is to protect the user experience. Because Facebook understands that their customers are not us advertisers, it's the Facebook user. Because without Facebook users, they don't have the advertisers. And so they at all costs want to protect that user experience, and they do that by ensuring that the ads that we produce are value driven. And so where I'm going with this is that you can no longer say, you can't imply that the user has some sort of a condition or an issue, or they're struggling or they're overwhelmed. You can't call people out. Yeah. And so, for example, I couldn't even say something like struggling to grow your email list, because I'm implying that they're struggling, and as as like simple as that sounds, like, I mean, that's not that big a deal. However, Facebook sees that as I'm implying that they have an issue. So you can't do that. And so instead, I could say something like looking to grow your email list. So it's just a little bit of a wordsmithing there to kind of turn it around and not make it so personal to that person, even though this goes against like hundreds of years of advertising best practices or whatever. So yeah, I would think about it from that perspective. As like, you want to be talking about how you can help that person, thinking about it from a benefits perspective. And I think one of the big things that trips people up is like, how corporate-y or how should I talk to that person? And again, it goes back to the mindset of people on Facebook. Facebook is a very laid-back kind of platform. It's sort of, I don't want to say impersonal because it's very personal, but it's like, how would you talk to your ideal customer if you're just sitting down with them for coffee? And that's how you should approach your ad copy. Sort of be fun and light with your ad copy, just like you're talking to them, that one person. And don't get too, don't be so rigid with that copy. And the lighter that you are, and sort of the more easygoing with their copy that you can be, the better. But focusing on how you can be helping them.
Yeah. No, I was going to go into compliance stuff in a little bit, but we could talk about it just for a second here. One of the other things that, and it's kind of along the same lines of what you were just saying, but one thing I know a lot of people have gotten in trouble for was actually calling out some of the demographics that they used. Having something in an ad copy that said like, "Are you between 25 and 35, female who likes Pat Flynn?"
Right.
If you do that and that's like the ad that you're targeting, that's gonna get you in trouble as well. Yeah. So obviously don't call out exactly what sort of demographics you're targeting in the ad, because that, supposedly creeps people out.
Yeah. But again, it's that user experience that they're trying to protect.
Right. So what other sort of compliance things should people be aware of when running Facebook ads? Because I know when I talk about list building or promoting a product and I tell people go run Facebook ads, I get so many people that are so scared to run Facebook ads because they've heard of so many people getting kicked off of Facebook ads.
Yep. Well, I mean, first and foremost is do read that policies page. And maybe you want to link that up in the show notes to them. But, if they just Google Facebook ads policies, it's like the first result that comes up there. Make sure that you check that out. One of the other big things that I see that people run into is that you need to be very clear on your call to action and what that person needs to do in order to get whatever you're giving away. And so if you are giving away, if you're trying to build your email list and you're trying to drive people to like an opt-in page, you need to be very clear on what that person needs to do. Like, so for example, you can't say, click here for free instant access. And then when they click, they have to register, they have to opt in. Well, that's not instant access.
Right.
There's still another step involved there that they need to do in order to get access to whatever you're giving away. Facebook has a big problem with that, and I've seen people's accounts shut down for that simple thing.
Wow.
So instead, you'd have to say, click here to register, or click here to opt in, or click here to give your email, whatever it might be. Tell them what exactly they need to do in order to get whatever you're giving away.
What about click here to learn more? Would that be a little gray, or would that be okay?
Yeah, you could say click here to learn more. However, well, I don't love that.
Yeah, I guess that gets a little gray, and if it's gray, then just avoid it.
Exactly. Just be really clear. Spell out what you want them to do and what they have to do in order to do whatever you want them to do. And you can't, like, even if it's like, click here to watch this free video or video series, and then they have to opt in for it. They have to give their name and email, or just their email or whatever it is. Again, that goes against what, like, that's not congruent. Like, it's register here for the free video series, And when you're setting that up, you want to think about, like, what types of words are my customers or my target audience, what's going to resonate with them? So if I say opt in, not everybody's going to know. Like, we all take that for granted,
Right.
Like, we all know what opt in means, but maybe our target audience doesn't know what a webinar is, or doesn't know what opt in means. So we have to really be clear and think about it from that perspective as well. So I would say those are the two biggest things. Is number one, you cannot imply any kind of condition or challenge, or can't call people out specifically. Like I've had somebody, they were saying like they were targeting soccer moms in their ad, and they called them out like, are you a soccer mom or something like that? And that got denied. Like, you can't do that. And that seems really, really, like, really, guys? But it's Facebook's rules. And if we want to play, in their sandbox, we got to play by their rules. So that, and then also being very, very clear on spelling out what you want them to do.
Got it. Very cool. So this next question, I'm not sure. I don't even know if we should go down this route or not, because I was going to ask you about best practices for landing pages that they go to. But, obviously people are going to be sending people to blog posts, podcast episodes, opt-in pages, sales pages. There's so many different potential landing pages. I guess any advice there on the landing page? Because this could obviously be a really deep rabbit hole that we don't really want to go too deep in right now.
Yeah, for sure. Like I would say, three things come to mind. Number one is be congruent with the look of your ad and on the landing page. So if you have like a color scheme, or you're using an image in the ad, make sure that color scheme or image is congruent on the landing page, so that there's that sort of comfort level that when people click from the ad, they know they're kind of in the right place. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two is it's a very good idea to have a link to your privacy policy on your landing page, because if you are collecting somebody's email address, you need to let them know, or give them the opportunity at least, to go check out what you're going to do with that email address. And then number three, and Facebook is not super, they do kind of mention this on the policies page, but they're not super clear about it. They've kind of gotten away, kind of like Google has when with AdWords and so forth, but they've kind of gotten away from just liking the fact that you can drive people, or that people are driving people from their ad to kind of like a straight up opt-in page with not a lot of other information on there. So what I recommend is that have a link, or have a link or two on your landing page that goes out to your blog, that goes out to your podcast or whatever. I think the language on the policies page is something like you have to give them the opportunity to leave that page. Mm-hmm. From that page, meaning we're not talking about the back button. We're talking about another link on that page, so that if they don't want to be on there, that they can go, to your blog or some other piece of content. So that's a really important one that not a lot of people think about. And again, it kind of goes against, when we're sending people to an opt-in page, we want them to do one thing, and that's opt-in. But Facebook is kind of it's protecting that user experience, and they want to give people the option. Yes, if they want to opt in, they can. If they want to link out, click to somewhere else, they can. So I would, definitely think about, how can I offer the opportunity for someone to go to my blog and check out, more content that I have.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never actually heard giving them the other links to get away from the page. That's very fascinating. One thing that I remember, this was maybe a year or two ago, it seemed like best practices for Facebook ads was to try to keep them in Facebook. Create a Facebook page, put an opt-in right inside of your Facebook page, and try to keep them in the Facebook platform. It seems like these days Facebook is actually encouraging people to send people away from their site now, and it's no longer really... do you still do any of that, or recommend any of that, like trying to keep them in Facebook's platform?
I don't. And it's been a couple of years since that was really sort of the strategy of send them to a Facebook tab, if you will, within Facebook. I'm not saying that doesn't work still, but the way I teach to send people off, to your website or to your landing page or whatever that might be, to content, and really, again, it goes back to that user experience, and we as advertisers can do that by adding value first to the audience. And by value, I mean sending them to an epic blog post or a video or a podcast episode, and then retargeting those people. And so obviously, by keeping them on Facebook, you're not able to do that. So by giving them that content, we're going to be sending them off of Facebook onto that content, and then retargeting them, and then getting them to take that next action. So it's not a strategy that I know of. Not a lot of people are doing it. I don't teach it. I don't do it myself. I'd rather get them over to, the idea first also is to get them off of Facebook, because Facebook controls that, the users there. we want to get them from Facebook onto our email list. We want to get them into our world. And so the quicker that we can do that, the better.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is too, I think the perspective from Facebook has changed a little bit as well. I think Facebook used to want you to keep people in their ecosystem. Now I think they encourage you to get them out of their ecosystem, because with the rise of retargeting, that's all new data to Facebook. Facebook can start to collect data on various websites that people visit. So they encourage people to send people away, because that's just more data that they collect that they can use to increase ad revenues for Facebook.
Yep,
so,
exactly.
Very cool. Let's see. Have you experimented at all with the new lead ads where they opt in straight inside of Facebook?
I have not, and the reason for that is whenever they roll out new functionalities like that, I always like to give it time to kind of let the dust settle. Because for the longest time, up until very recently, there were very few third-party tools that allowed once you got that ad to go directly into your CRM, whether it's Infusionsoft or whatever. And so for a while there, those leads lived within Facebook. Then you had to go into Facebook and download them into your CRM. And then, we live in a world of like people want instant, that instant gratification. So if we're giving something away, they don't, people don't want to wait 24 hours to get that. Like they want it then and there. So I didn't think it was a very good user experience. Now, with that said, there's a lot of tools now that allow you to automatically or sort of dynamically, if you will, as you get those leads within the lead ads, that they can come directly into your CRM, and the process, begins of getting them whatever they opted in for. So I have not, just because of that, I've not started testing around with that. I'm going to start testing that, but I wanted to make sure that, and I think that they still have a lot of kinks to work out with it as well. But it is an interesting thing because people, they don't have to necessarily enter all their information because it's already in Facebook. But I want to make sure that I can get them whatever they're opting in for as quickly as possible, because when they do that, they're interested at that moment. You know what I mean? The longer the longer the period of time goes between when they opted in and when I can get them that content, I'm losing them as a qualified lead at that point. So, I think things are going to only get better there, and I'm excited to test it out. But that's the reason why I've stayed away from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think services like Aweber, GetResponse, Infusionsoft, all those kinds of tools that are out there, they're all going to build their own integrations into Facebook eventually, so you don't have to use those third-party tools. So I think that will only get easier over time as those sort of sites jump on board with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's one little thing that I want to go into, last sort of topic, and this was actually based on a YouTube video that I saw you do about using Facebook ads to grow a following on iTunes. I remember there was a video that you put out, and I was wondering if you could talk about that strategy just for a second of using Facebook ads to grow a podcast on iTunes.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that is really cool about iTunes is, and not a lot of people know this, but if you go on iTunes, you go to your podcast, you go to a specific episode, over on the right-hand side of that episode, there's a Get Link little drop-down menu, and I forget what the three things are, but one of them is copy URL. And when you do that, it's the URL of that specific episode. And so if I want to drive people from a Facebook ad to iTunes, for example, for a particular episode, that's the URL that I can use rather than sending somebody to my overall podcast. So that's one of the first things, too, is that be really clear. Also, you want to be really clear on why you're doing this in the first place. I was just talking with one of my students earlier today who wants to do the same thing. They're actually managing a campaign for a client of theirs, and they just started a podcast. And it goes back to the very first thing we were talking about earlier is, well, why do you want to do this? Like, why? Because there's no instant return on sending a Facebook ad to a podcast page. And so because of that, you want to be really clear. So maybe, one of those reasons could be that you're just launching your podcast now. You really want to get it on iTunes new and noteworthy, so you have 8 weeks to do that. So I want to bump up traffic as much as possible so I can increase exposure on iTunes. That's a great reason. Okay. Another reason might be like, I have a sponsor for my show, and that sponsor pays me based on how many downloads that I get or how many listens I have. And so the more I can bump that up, the higher the revenue I could get from my sponsorship. That's another reason. Or maybe I don't know, maybe you offer a download or you're trying to build your email list during your show. And so I know that by having more listeners, the more apt I am to build my email list when I mention it during my show. So these are all reasons that could be very, a good reason to run ads, to pay money out to get people to the podcast. But a lot of people kind of just look at it like, well, I just want to do it because I want to get more listens. And like, okay, but you're paying money out to do Facebook ads. What's that potential return that you need to be thinking about either right then and there or down the road? And so, yeah, it's pretty basic from that perspective, and just being really clear on why you want to do it. You can get the link right in iTunes. And then the other thing too is that what I like to do is if you have an individual episode that you want to promote specifically, you could do like a video ad or you could do like a standard image ad, but talk about, what do you teach something like what's the benefit of somebody listening to that particular episode? What are they going to learn? So like for this episode, maybe something like, all right, learn, all the things we talked about, targeting for Facebook and ad policies and whatever. Focus on that and give the benefit of why somebody would want to listen to that episode, and focus on individual episodes and maybe have a picture of your guest or whatever, obviously getting their permission. But you could set it up like that, as opposed to doing an ad for like an overall, for your overall podcast. Like focus on specific episodes of what people are going to learn, and then that's going to help you with your targeting as well.
Yeah, and one thing that you mentioned in the video as well, just to kind of tack onto the strategy, is when you actually run your Facebook ad, you could go into your targeting and only target people who are on iPhones, so it'll pop open in iTunes for them. Which I thought
exactly.
was really
So if your goal is to drive listenership and downloads on iTunes, then you can target by mobile device, or you can target your mobile news feed, and then you can target iOS devices. If you want to target Android users, then you could send people to your Stitcher page and target mobile news feed, and then Android users. So you can get really granular with the targeting that way, and you're gonna avoid a lot of waste by not targeting down to the mobile device level.
Yeah, because I noticed if somebody clicks on that specific link, the URL they get from iTunes, but if they click on it just on a regular web browser, it just opens up their iTunes page. It doesn't take them necessarily to that podcast episode.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's really only beneficial to use that link if they're opening it in a phone, really, right?
Yep.
Cool. Now, do you think it's worth it to run ads consistently to just try to climb the ranks in iTunes, even if you're outside of the new and noteworthy phase? Do you think there's value in doing that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it all comes down to like, what is the goal? You know what I mean? So like, are you trying to build your email list during your episodes? Like, are you driving to like a specific, like a content upgrade or something like that people can download on your show notes page? Or or maybe it's, I have things that people can buy on my show notes page or downloads there. So I want to send people from, rather than sending them to iTunes, send them to, we were talking about this before, send them to my show notes page. So just being really clear on that and like why you want to do it. But yeah, it's that's what answers that question is, do you have a clear reason for doing that? Especially if you have like an advertiser on the podcast, and the more downloads that you get, the more money that you can get from that advertiser. Then you want to look at, okay, well, if I can bump up listenership by this much by spending this much money on my Facebook ads, and I want to get paid this much money from my advertiser, well, it certainly makes sense. You know what I mean? You do have to kind of calculate that out and make sure that there's going to be an ROI and they're not going to be losing money. But yeah, I mean, again, depending on what the why is, it's a great strategy to do that.
Got it. Makes sense. Cool. So last final questions. Do you have any books that you tend to find yourself recommending often?
Ooh. Put me on the spot.
They don't necessarily have to be specifically on the topic we talked about. They could be general business or whatever.
Yeah. I'm looking to my left here to look at my book. Yes, a couple of them. Number one is 80/20 Sales and Marketing. and I don't, there's more to it. It's like how to get bigger results while working less or something like that. But if you just look at 80/20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall, one of my favorite books on sales and marketing. It's all about, the whole 80/20 principle and applying that to your sales and marketing and what you're doing in those efforts. It's one of the books that I recommend when it comes to people wanting to improve, their marketing efforts. It's a great book. Another book that, The Magic of Thinking Big,
great book.
by, the last name is Schwartz. I can't read his first name. I forget his first name. The Magic of Thinking Big is a great book. It's an older book, but it's got some great stuff in there. And I would say the other one, I'll leave it at this one here, is Russell Brunson's .com Secrets. One of the best books I've read, and I've had Russell on the podcast to talk about it, but when it comes to like how to build your funnel and in breaking it down in such a way that it's very easy to understand, he's got pictures in there. If you're looking at like, all right, I want to create some sort of funnel for my business, and he breaks it down, teaches you how to do it, gives you different examples of it. .com Secrets is a great book and probably one of the best books that I've read on how to do that in your business. So .com Secrets, Magic of Thinking Big, and 80/20 Sales and Marketing. I think you asked for one. There's
Very cool. Yeah, it's hard to give just one. I'm a big reader. I try to read about 2 to 3 books a week, so I go through a ton of books.
Oh, wow.
So I'm constantly looking for new stuff. But .com Secrets is a great recommendation. Very, very actionable. I love that you can actually open the book, flip through it, and actually start taking actions on some of the stuff that they give you. So it's a very, very good recommendation. So final question, where can people go to learn more about you? Where do you hang out online? Where should we send people after this episode?
Yeah, I would love it if people checked out the podcast, The Art of Paid Traffic. They can just search in iTunes or in Stitcher, The Art of Paid Traffic. That is a great place. And also my website, rickmulready.com. Go ahead and hop on the email list there. Tons of great information coming your way. And that's a great way to stay up on, what's going on in this crazy Facebook ads world and what I'm up to and what, how what we're doing can help you out there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you hanging out with me and taking the time to share this awesome information. I think this is an actionable episode. People can kind of follow along and take some action steps. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks.